So hey guys, hey. I'm deciding to finally do this coming out story video, which several people have like requested from both me and Ace Face, and it would be kind of weird to do it together because it's so different. We weren't together when we came out, and she had it a lot easier than I did, and probably she still has her own story, but her parents and her friends really were accepting, and it was awesome for her. I was not as lucky, but I mean, it wasn't my path. Mine was just different. And so I didn't really like to go backwards and think about at this time in my life because it was so dark. And being a kid and growing up in every kind of like social situation everybody deals with, whether they're aware of it or not, you deal with it in some respect of growing up and fitting in and finding yourself, and relationships and sexuality and all that makes it so much more complicated. So with that said, I've tried to make this video now several times, and each time I'm telling the story I remember so much more. So I'm trying to like put it down to size. So anyways, I'll try to tell you as much as I can, as fast as I can, hopefully not bore you. But vlogging is therapeutic, and I'm hoping that either this helps someone else or it helps me when I have to watch this back later on, because it's always kind of good to have these kind of things therapeutic to like get it out. So my coming out story would be complicated per usual for me, right? All my stories are complicated. So I always kind of knew that I had an inkling that I liked girls more than normal, but I was so young. I don't think I understood, but I do remember always kind of having these weird feelings now looking back. I wasn't so much into boys when I was younger. I do remember taking on being very boy obsessed in my middle years of like, you know, being from like 11, probably like puberty. I also hit puberty very early. So anyways, never really had any boyfriends growing up. I had a lot of boy crushes and stuff that I remember. Like I said, in those years between like 11 and 14, I don't really remember. Before 11, I always just remember wanting to just be around my girlfriends or friends, you know. Still later on, I still would have preferred to be around a group of girls and not so much with boys. But I felt like my attraction to guys was kind of like on a surface level, like I was attracted to them, but I never really had any connection. And I totally noticed that I had a deeper connection with girls, and I was more stimulated by that, which again, I thought was why I thought I always wanted to hang out with girls. I was probably about 12 years old when I think I finally started to understand, or maybe even accept or explore the concept of being gay or liking girls more, because over the years I was definitely noticing like I felt like I was doing something wrong, kind of like I just felt like I was sinning in that sense, I guess. And at that point I remember there was a change, and that was probably about 7th grade. And I had moved, well, my parents got a divorce. We had moved away from the town I was raised in for several years together, but when my parents got a divorce, I moved back to Novato. And I remember going through the move and then the divorce and everything, and kind of feeling a little bit like an outcast, because moving around kind of does that, especially in those years, because I didn't have friends with roots, and people get kind of cliquey, and especially in the town that I grew up in, Novato, because it's very small. And anyways, it was kind of hard going back, and it was just a different period of time, and I felt something different inside me, but I didn't know, and I kind of was fighting it too. And I kind of started to like rebel against myself in a way, in the sense of I remember starting to tell all these lies to people at these camps that I would go to, and like making up personas. They're usually boyfriends that I had, and I would always have these elaborate stories, and I didn't really know why I would do it. And I would kind of remember like hearing myself, like my mouth was moving and my brain was like, stop, but I just didn't. I just felt the need to always pretend that I was someone different. And it probably kind of came from like moving around, and I don't really know why, but I remember doing that, and it kind of creeped me out, but I didn't stop, and I kept kind of like being like that and being mean to people too. I noticed I was kind of like being a little bit of a bully myself to people that were younger than me. I noticed that I would start saying hateful things about people or things, and I was kind of like starting to be angry, or just, I don't know, I started to be kind of like a little bit of a class clown and always be loud, and it was like I was screaming for attention basically. And I remember also being very obsessive with boys, and I don't know if it was like I was trying to psych myself out or what, but I remember being almost like borderline stalker, like with like any boys I had crushes on in middle school in like 7th, 8th grade, and total girl stuff, but like crazy. And I wonder why I'd never really had a boyfriend growing up, but I didn't ever really have a relationship or like anything that ever went anywhere. And I just kind of felt so different and weird from all the girls that I knew. And, you know, as my friends were going off and whatever with boys and wanting to always talk about boys. And I was always kind of like overweight, and I wasn't like the pretty girl out of my friends, and all my friends were so pretty, and I always kind of felt like an outcast-ish because I was a little bit heavier always as a kid, and you know, no boys were trying to holler at me or trying to get me, so I felt like I was fighting so hard, and I almost started putting on this persona that I thought I was supposed to have. I don't know, my brain was so stubborn, I didn't understand what was going on, but I definitely felt something shifting. And I think while that was happening, my mom had decided to send me to this other camp. I normally had gone to this one little family camp every year, but she one year decided to send me to this other camp, and probably because it was like all about skill building and learning to trust people and be comfortable with yourself and all that. I didn't really know how to fit in, kind of. But I had friends, but I remember acting really funny, like mean, kind of, and my friends started to deplete a little bit, and I was losing who I was, or I didn't know how I was, but I didn't know if it was hormonal or moving, or I didn't know why this was happening, and I wasn't really ready to accept it. But like I said, I had just started to kind of explore these concepts, but again, I didn't know anyone that was gay, or at least openly, so I didn't really have anything to like go off of other than I wasn't. And before I had gone to this camp, actually, coincidentally, like I said, as I started to even explore these thoughts, the town I lived in, Novato, received a lot of media coverage, even to the point because there were so many hate crimes. It was a very, very conservative town. It had a lot of money. It had a lot of stereotypical things about suburban places and kind of the hate that goes on in the cliques and like the movie Mean Girls. Became a very good reality for me in some respects. And I had my oldest sister growing up was half black, so it was no stranger to the hate judgment she received, but she always handled it so well. But again, I didn't really know with being gay that I was before I could even understand that. But I think that these things pushed me in my shell, because at the very high school I would later go to, not a couple years later, a boy was to start like a gay straight alliance group at the high school or something, and I remember he got nearly beaten to death by a group of hicks, and I remember that being like all over the news and stuff, and they like carved fag all over his arm and his stomach or something. They all went to the school together. I don't remember where it actually took place, but he apparently had also been beaten up like months before that by these same people, like brutally beaten up. It was crazy. Luckily, I don't think he died. I think he just was in critical condition, but I remember watching that on the news. I felt like there was this weird connection to it. I just felt so sick about it. I remember, but I was so young, and again, I wasn't ready to say that I was gay, or I didn't know, but later on each of these things that I would encounter, I was like, why am I so connected to this? There must be something else here. Why, I don't even know this guy, but why do I have such a strong connection to it? So my mom had sent me up to go to this camp, and I fought her, and I really didn't want to go, and I was mad I had to go somewhere else, and I went, and it was like at a college campus, and I remember it was like the hugest group of people, and there were so many different people from so many different walks of life, and they were like bisexual, transgender, extra, everything from sexuality, race, body weight, lifestyle, hobbies, everything, education levels. I mean, there were so many different ages. It was just crazy, the group of people that this camp had. That camp really opened the door for me to start to see that people were so accepting of different lifestyles, and also see people that were gay. And then that started to hit home with me and make me be like, okay, maybe those are all the things that I previously kind of were like, hey, that's weird, red flag, but I didn't know how to process it. But I also remember that there was like this one girl there, I think her name was like Rebecca, and I wasn't attracted to her, but I was like mesmerized by her and her presence, and she was so confident with herself and being gay, and I think she was bisexual, and she just was like the nicest girl, but she was so confident, so loud, so just whatever about herself, and I was just like hypnotized by her every time she was around, and I was like, why am I so hypnotized with her? I'm not attracted to her, like, what is this? And I started to like sit alone at camp and think about it, and I was like, maybe I'm really like jealous of what she is. And she was such a nice person. She was so nice to everyone, and I was becoming so mean to everyone. Of course, I still had to put on that cool kid facade, and I remember kind of like not really being a part of anything at that camp. Like, I watched it all, and it had a big impact on me, but I still didn't like participate. Like, I really kind of just sat on the sidelines and like kind of like looked at everybody else. But it started to break me down on the inside, and realized that I was becoming exactly what I was terrified of coming out for. Like, I was pushing myself in a shell because I thought it wasn't okay to be what I was thinking I was becoming, and as a result I was becoming the thing that was scaring me. It was this crazy cycle I was starting to see, and that's probably also where I started to kind of like grow outside my own mind, because it was like blowing me away. And anyways, I came home from camp, and I got online. I remember meeting this girl online that lived in Nebraska, and we would talk for like hours and every night. And then I remember I probably would talk about her to my parents and like say I knew her from camp or something. And my mom got really mad when she found the phone bill, because it was really expensive way back in the day to call long distance. And so she started freaking out on me and was like, you can't talk to her, blah blah. And I'm sure that they got like an inkling. Like, this is basically when I start coming out. Like, I didn't really sit down and come out. They basically like were like, why are you talking to this girl? Obviously you're talking to this girl. And I got really mad about it, I'm sure. And I had to be like, she's my girlfriend. And my parents instantly were like, no, you're not. You can't be. You're not gay. You haven't even had a boyfriend yet. You're too young. You're just confused. It's an easier way to be with girls because, you know, you're friends with them, and every girl like has a connection with girls because they think differently, but that's not the same thing. You're just confused, and you've never even been with a dude. How would you know? And years of this conversation. But again, I think that the whole online thing, because the internet was not like a big hit at that point, and my parents were both in law enforcement, so they're just thinking like I met this creeper and whatever. This girl Sally in Nebraska, she really was like giving me the platform to kind of like feel it out and like talk to another girl and feel like if this was something I was doing, because I had no idea still, and I hadn't met a girl, and and I was building this relationship, and I really felt a lot of feelings for this girl. And but my parents kept telling me I didn't know what I was doing, and I was too young to understand that, and I didn't know who she was, but I felt like I did, and I kept fighting for her, and I kept talking to her no matter what they said and how much they would ground me and whatnot. And so it became into this huge battle between me and my parents about talking to this girl. And so I tell my friends, because I have to start telling them why I'm grounded and whatever, and started with my closest friends and worked my way out. And I had mix of reactions. I should have known better, but I guess I was in such a reaction of my parents being so mad and so angry and being like no and shutting it down, and just I started to go back into my shell and get angry at them because they wouldn't even like validate or listen to me. And one of my friends just started crying and got really awkward, and I did not understand why that was happening. And eventually we kind of like became distant and then stopped talking, and when we had class together it was really weird. And so obviously it was very much affected, and kind of stopped being friends. And this was coincidentally when we go into our freshman year of high school, that I basically, like the summer of, I had started to tell them. But a couple of my other friends had mixed reactions. Some of them were very weird, but still didn't disown me. Some kind of stopped talking to me. But a couple of my closer friends too were really great. And one girl that we weren't the closest, but we always knew each other. She was very accepting and very like, okay, cool, you are you. That's great. I mean, really, you always seem like you liked boys a lot, and you're like crazy boy obsessed. You sure? Okay, whatever, pass the soup or whatever. But so that kind of surprised me on a couple of accounts, and then I, as a result, became closer to those people that like didn't get awkward and weird. But my friendship started to fade, and it made me feel really lonely. And then I started to have this resentment with my parents, with them trying to fight it. So I started to kind of just feel very angry and misplaced, because I started to feel like I understood, and now they're trying to tell me I don't, and maybe I don't because I'm so young. And then because I, as you've seen if you know me or my videos, I always try to like look at both sides. So even as a kid I was beyond my years, and I kind of was always lost in translation. And going into freshman year of high school was a big deal, because I was never the really popular girl, and the popular girls that were in like the grade above me, like I said earlier, my high school really reminded me of Mean Girls, and I was bullied on several occasions. And I was always chubbier, or I had comments thrown my way like in 8th grade too, I remember, but it wasn't so bad. It was usually just about my weight. But coincidentally, after I came out, I guess word spreads, because I don't tell everyone, but I remember feeling very awkward walking by people and people whispering. Now, I wasn't like anything spectacular, and everybody wasn't talking about it, and it wasn't some scene from a movie where it was posters, but like I remember feeling a vibe that changed, and it got really awkward and uncomfortable. And I had eggs thrown at me and rocks thrown at me, and was called a fat dyke and other names, and I tried to block all that stuff out, so I don't remember all of it, or just tried to act like I didn't hear it. And I remember nasty notes being slipped into my locker while I was in class, and just things and like whispers whenever I walked places, and like giggles everywhere. It definitely tormented me and made me feel so uncomfortable, and I just felt like, great, I finally, like, I'm grounded all the time, and the only place I really have is here at school. And like now why did I even come out? Why am I trying to go against the grain if this is what I'm going to get? This is not any better. This is almost worse. Like, yeah, a couple of people don't really mind, but the flack that I'm getting, and it just opened up the floodgates, it seemed like, to be made fun of. And freshman hazing and all that was in full effect at my school, and I wasn't the only one that was bullied. I mean, a lot of people were made fun of if you were outside of the box. So I was just like, and girls love to be girls and be mean to each other anyways, so I wasn't anything new. But it just felt like, for me, it was a lot on my plate all at once, because it just felt like it kept coming. And I started to feel really affected by the negativity or the hate, or just like things that were coming my way, and it started to really break me down. It felt like this is when I started to go back in my shell, because I wasn't obviously the mean girl, and I didn't have the upper hand with anything anymore, and I tended to start feeling like things were coming at me as opposed to me coming at them. And I really didn't like it, and I really started to feel angry. And during this process also, I had met Ashley, and things didn't work out with Sally in Nebraska. And as soon as I started talking to Ashley, I had like tunnel vision. I was like just hooked, and my gut usually was right, and I was just so determined because here's another person all the way across the state. I'm not even like looking locally, but then again, I never knew anybody locally, but there was something there, and she just, the things that she made me feel, and there was just a connection with her, and I couldn't deny that, and I was determined. And so of course when my parents found out that she was, you know, almost 18, she was like 4 years older than me and I was 14, they immediately were like, red flag, no, you know, this is on top of us telling you can't talk to these girls, now there's another one. And they would send me to counselors, they would forbid me to talk to her and be like, what's going on, you know, and threaten that, like, you know, they would do all kinds of things and whatever and try to like scare me to just get me to listen to them. And I just kept resisting and kept talking to her, and I kept getting grounded. And of course I didn't have any resources to talk to her, so I would go through hell and high water and take money here and there, like change, and then it turned into money from them because I was angry at them, and so I justified it in my stupid brain, and just like would steal money to get phone cards. I'd even go all the way out of my way to the freaking Costco and lie about going to the movies to my parents, and walk all the way to the Costco and get a cheaper phone card because it was on sale. And I just was so determined and had such a plan for this, and they would catch me, and when they'd catch me they would get so mad at me. And every time I remember it being like a knockdown drag out, it was just like the biggest fights. I mean, anything that could have been taken away from me was, anytime I could have been grounded, I was, anytime that they could have been mad at me, I was, any restriction and privilege, you know, it just always kind of continued. And not to say that I didn't, you know, cause it, but it was just really hard for me because, you know, I loved this person and they didn't understand and were standing in the way, and I felt like it was their fault, whatever. And it was hard for me to fight for being gay because I didn't know, I hadn't figured it out. But I mean, I was, but I still, the label was hard for me. It wasn't about the label, it was about the person, it was about the connection, you know, and the connection with the girl. And I guess that meant I was gay, but what if I was bi? Because remember, I liked boys, but I don't know if I was just pretending. I don't know, like I haven't had a boy. So I was just very confused, and I didn't know, and only time would tell, I guess. But in the process of being a freshman and like having to deal with being bullied and made fun of, and then my parents shutting me out and losing friends, I just felt so lost. And so just like, what am I fighting for if everyone's fighting against me? Maybe I'm the fool, maybe I'm the one that's in the wrong because they're all turning their backs. And it got to the point where I remember sitting outside of my school one day with one of my friends. Like I said, they got kind of awkward, and these girls came up, and there was like a couple of them that really like seemed to hate me, but there was like a whole pack of them, and they kind of were standing over while I was waiting to get picked up from school, and they started throwing rocks at me and just like saying these horrible, horrific names. And I just remember sitting there and trying to like act like it wasn't happening. And I don't know why I couldn't stand up for myself, probably because I was outnumbered, but I just felt so small, and they just wouldn't stop. And my friend even got up and went and sat with them. I mean, they're pebbles, like they weren't like knocking me out with boulders, but they were throwing rocks at me, like like laughing and like talking about me, and I'm just sitting in a bench, and my friend gets up and goes and stands over there to like probably protect her own self. But that just was a big symbol to me that like, between the hate, like I said, that I had remembered from years before, and the fact that material money seemed more important in like everything else than like humanity or like anything, or I mean the things that people were willing to do or say to each other, I started to feel like at this town, like at first I started to feel like it was like the world, but when I had gone to that camp and I had lived in the other town, I was like, there are people out there that are different. There are people out there that are a little bit more accepting. I know my parents aren't right now, but they're just fighting everything right now and like whatever. And I was just so headstrong and determined, and I just couldn't understand. But I kept going through these lulls of feeling so dark and like so lost. Like, do I fight this fight? Because it takes so much energy to fight against your parents and whatever, and like feeling like you don't fit in already, and the trials and tributes that is high school and puberty and everything already, and then you go into like trying to fit in or figure yourself out too. I didn't know who I was, so I didn't know how to announce it to everyone or fight for it. So I remember getting really dark, and I definitely got to the point of feeling suicidal on very many occasions. Now I couldn't do it, thankfully, but I did get to this point one day where I decided to go and raid a medicine cabinet. And I remember taking all of like the prescription painkillers, and there was, I don't know if it was like muscle, I didn't even like pay attention. I'm sure I looked to some regard, but I was so just like in that mode of I don't care, fuck it, and I hate this and I hate the world and everyone's just ruining my life. And I tried to like take everything, because that was the most passive way that I knew how to just stop living or not dealing with it, or just pause and end game something. But I probably knew that it was okay, or it wasn't okay. It was very stupid, because I could have like done something very horrific, but thankfully for me it wasn't. And anyways, the next day almost passed out, or I did pass out, it's all such a blur. And I had to eventually go to the front office and the principal's office and like explain that, and of course me trying to tell them I'm gay, and this is like people that kind of like, oh, like you could see them like as I said that, and then again I just feel so much darker. And then they had to call my parents, and my dad was pissed at me. He was pissed at me, and he came to the school and he picked me up, and he was, because they were trying to send me to the emergency room, and he was like, I'm not gonna pay for that, which I understand now because that shit's expensive. expensive, because I was okay. I had, luckily, I mean, I was sick to my stomach, and later I developed an ulcer and whatnot from like eating stomach lining and stuff, but I wasn't dying. And my dad was so mad at me for pulling the stunt and whatever, and he just was so angry with me in the car on the way home, because he had like picked me up from school and was taking me to his house. But I live with my mom, but he was like taking me back to his house because he was like, I was in trouble. But I remember thinking like, God, he really hates me. Like, those people were trying to get me help and he hates me. And over the years I understood that it was such a struggle for them too, and it was so hard to deal with. And later on, like that, I don't think it was that night, but I think it was like the next day, he had made me go on like a ride along with him as punishment. And I kind of secretly loved it, because I always loved when I got to spend time with my parents, because normally we were just fighting, you know, I was doing what I wasn't supposed to be, or they didn't want to talk about it, and it was like the elephant in the room, you know, if we were hanging out. And they would get mad at me for lying or stealing or whatever, and from things, and sneaking around, because I still successfully kept talking to them no matter what, and that was really hard for them. And anyways, the next day or so, or a couple days later or whatever, I was with him and he made me go on a ride along, and I remember that he had to go, and my grandpa, I had gotten really sick and was passing away, or passed away, and it literally happened within like couple of days of me pulling that stunt. And it was like a big deal to me, and was like an eye-opening, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what if you did do something and then your dad would have had to deal with both of that back to back? Like, what are you doing to these people? And I instantly started to like gain pause, and I started to really feel like I like went into this place of like, maybe I shouldn't be gay, maybe I'm doing this to everyone else and I'm hurting all the ones that I love, and like whatever. And at one point, when my dad was angry at me, he had made this comment about how he would never have a grandchild, or I wouldn't have a wedding or whatever. And it really, like, those things were starting to come back to me when his dad had passed away. I wasn't like really close to my grandpa, but I started like thinking about these things, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna hurt my dad and like and not give him what I want. Maybe it's what I want. I'm like confused. And so I actually like tried to stop talking to Ashley. I like broke up with her, and like I tried to not talk to her, and I tried to go to church. And they had sent me to many counselors over the years to try to like, some of them tried to talk me out of being, not out of, basically they tried to all like paraphrase that it was because I was acting out and I wasn't sure of it. Like I only remember one counselor that really kind of embraced the concept of me being gay or exploring it. The other ones were kind of like on my parents' side in that respect. So it was kind of weird. And I was trying to go to church and like pray the gay out, and I just started to feel more and more just lost and confused, and I didn't know how this was supposed to happen, because again, I didn't know anybody in person. And like, what if I was fighting for something I didn't even know, because I hadn't even met this girl like in real life? But I can't deny a conversation, because actually conversations on the phone sometimes harder. And if we had now established this crazy relationship with like all these obstacles, like if that's not love, that started to like be like, what is? Because like I've been this dedicated, I want to get to the end, I want to meet her, and I want to know, because that's the only way I felt like I could accept that was going to be, even 3 years into our relationship as it was, like once we finally did get to meet. Oh, fucking dog. But even so, it was always like fate brought us back together, because like every time I wanted to break up or thought I should break up with Ashley, it was like we'd always find our way back to each other. And really later on down the line, I actually moved in with my dad because him and his girlfriend were moving in together, and she had a daughter the same age as me. And I like started freaking out, thinking like she was going to replace me or he was going to like her better. And meanwhile, I hated my school and felt so uncomfortable and just like awkward and alone there. So I just kind of felt like it was what I wanted to do, because I just wanted to get out of the high school that I was in, and I just felt so uncomfortable. And so like a stranger, like I didn't want to be in that kind of hate environment anymore. So I moved in with him, and actually a couple years later, him and his girlfriend had broken up, and then we were living by ourselves. And it was one of the last times I was caught talking to her, and it was like this huge explosion. And him and my mom had like contacted Ashley's parents and told them like if we kept talking that they would they tried to like threaten her, be like, we'll arrest you or something, you know, like scare off, because she was 18 I think at that point. And all hell broke loose. And since they broke us up, we really broke up, and we probably stopped talking that time, I want to say a couple of months or so. And I didn't have a phone number anymore, and we didn't have like social stuff to go on. I couldn't get online anymore, and I was totally grounded. And I don't know how, but I remember somehow I got back in touch with her one day. I probably called her from somewhere I wasn't supposed to or something, because unfortunately a lot of people were subjected to my phone calls from their house, whether it was my friends, my parents' friends, my uncle, anyone. So I apologize if that was any of you, because I did a lot of crappy things and tried to do whatever I could to talk to my girlfriend, and eventually thankfully it worked out. But it was unfortunate that, you know, during the process there was a lot of shit that happened. But, you know, we eventually then found our way back to each other, and that was right after that then we actually met in person. But once I finally did get to meet her when I was a senior in high school or so. My dad finally had ungrounded me. I think he kind of like gave up on the battle. I had wrote him a letter of like all my feelings and stuff, and probably told him that, you know, I felt very misplaced because we always kind of felt like roommates, or just it put a big wedge in our relationship because of like me lying on top of it, because I never really got to see my parents' reaction to solely me being gay. It was about like the whole thing. And so they never were really into it, and they never were okay with it. And my siblings were awkward with it. My middle sister, luckily, was the only one that was like okay and like totally would embrace me and Ashley's relationship or me being gay. You know, to each is their own. Everyone kind of like struggled with it so much, but it made me very confused and questioned myself so much. And I was so lost, and I totally forgot how lost I really got. And then I just kept fighting and kept going and tried to just like, there were moments where it got really dark, but then it just kept going. And eventually I like got to where I needed to go. Thankfully, my gut and my head were right about not only my sexuality, but about who I was with. Because again, to me, my journey was more about like the person I didn't know. I didn't get to explore this. So I have a very different coming out story. And so it makes it longer and confusing. So I'm sorry, but that's basically that. And we met, like I said, in the middle of my senior year, and that was like in 2000, then to 2004. And it was great to, after all those years, meet her. And it just like was everything that we thought it was going to be. And then, you know, 6 months later, I graduated from high school and then moved out and got an apartment. She moved in with me. And you know, that's probably really like too when my parents started to like embrace her. Now my dad was like, I want you to live together for a year, because he was like kind of waiting for it to fail, I guess, because he was headstrong too. Wonder where I get it from. Then, I mean, my parents now love her more than anything and support us more than anything. So I'm very thankful and glad that I kept just going. And no matter who bullied me or the hate that I saw or encountered or was affected by, or the things that I said or did to cover it up, it was all kind of a learning curve, and it wasn't easy. And there was a lot of pain and confusion along the way, but the only way to keep going is to literally keep going and eventually figure out why you had to go through all those journeys, and everything makes or breaks who you are. So this is what made me, and thankfully I'm still with Ashley to this day. So, you know, it's pretty great to say that I never, knock on wood. I'm lucky that I found the person and it all worked out. So it's not easy to paraphrase, so I hope I didn't bore you to sleep. And if you didn't make it to the end, that's okay. So make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, leave me any questions or anything, inquiries, or any videos that you'd like me to see. And I hope this helps anyone. If any of you need any advice or anything, I love to talk to people. And since I went to so many counselors all the time, I love talking and thinking. So everything does get better. Everything does get easier. You find yourself, and you know, those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. So, and sometimes the ones that even mind eventually stop minding because you prove yourself, and then it'll be what it'll be, and everyone that's supposed to be there will, and you just got to be you and figure out who that is and where you're going. Just stay dedicated, because I didn't know, and a lot of times a lot of people don't know, and then even when they haven't figured out, they still don't know. So don't feel bad about what it looks like or how it feels, and try not to embrace the pain or negativity that surrounds you if it surrounds you. And it's a hard journey for a lot of people, and everyone in life has to struggle, whether they want to admit it or not. Just some are louder and bolder and bigger than others, and some aren't. So, you know, just remember that everyone that's putting their hate, or if there's negativity that surrounds you, it's coming from somewhere negative within themselves, just like I was doing when I was trying to bully people. It was when I didn't know who I was and I was in denial, so I kind of put that on someone else. So just know that someone else is in the same spot you are. They just don't know how to deal with it, and try not to, you know, take it in. And it's good to be a sponge and like soak in what's around you, but you got to make sure to like spit out the bullshit, because that stuff will like make you heavy and weigh you down and be your baggage if you let it. So it was hard for me, and I'm glad that I don't think about it all the time, because it brought a lot of sadness to my heart. But I'm thankful for who I am today and who it made me, and I'm thankful for everything, and I'm grateful for my parents and how great they are now, and I'm sorry that they had to go through all that because it was complicated. So love your faces. Hopefully I can cut this down to something. See you next time. I won't come out again. Promise.